Yeah, a fresh, cool young Lou trying to cash his microphone check 212. Wanna believe my own hype, but it's too untrue. The world brought me to my knees. What have you brung you? Did you improve on the design? Did you do something new? Where your name in on the guest list? Who brung you? You, the more famous person, you come through, and the sexy lady next to you, you come too. And then the hitman standing outside of heaven, waiting for God to come and get me. I'm too uncouth, unschooled to the rules, and too gumshoe. Too much of a newcomer and too uncool. Like shadow in the veil, I battle with it well. Though I need a holiday like lady who sung blue. Go back, whatever you did, you undo. Heavy as heaven, the devil on me 2 tons too. If you are what you say you are, a superstar, then have no fear. The camera's here and the microphones, and they wanna know. Yeah. And you better wear your shades. The spotlights here can burn holes through the stage. Down through the basement past the Indian graves where the dinosaurs laid, and out through China nearly misses airliners magnified ×5. This is pointing at the rhyme and ricochets off the moon and sets the forest ablaze. Now that's important to say, cause even with all that, most of us don't want it to fade. We want it to braid, meaning we want it to grow, meaning we want it to stay. Like the governor called and he told him to wait. Unstrap him from the chair and put him back in his cage. The audience ain't phased, and they ain't gon' clap, and they ain't gon' praise. They want everything back that they paid, cause they've been waiting since 10 to see the lights get dim. If you are what you say you are, a superstar.
Perfect, Faye. Thank you, team. Happy Winning Wednesday. Great to see everybody. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. Perfect. Just muted Cardone Ventures. Hi again. My name is Jazmin Lingo. I am a director here at Cardone Ventures, and I'm super excited to be your guys' host today. So I know we have a few more people trickling in, but most of you have probably been on this call before. We like engagement. We like cameras on. We want to see your great faces, and we want to hear those wins. So I would love to get some volunteers to start raising their hands to share a couple wins before we get started into today's topic, because this is where we come to learn and grow and demonstrate our, how we're all being 10x in our roles. So I can happily share a win on behalf of myself, but I'm not going to move on until I get a couple of volunteers. So
Are you dipping in?
I don't know if Brad meant to unmute himself, but I think that's a good opportunity to volunteer him to share a win. Are you there, Brad Scroggins?
Yes. Recently, we've expanded on our production. We used to warehouse pallets and then resell them, but now we're producing full production of wooden pallets of various sizes for our customers, and that's a huge bump in business for our company. So that's our win for the week.
That's massive. Expanding your product offerings and able to drive more flow and reach more potential customers. That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Anytime.
Let's get Lisa unmuted.
Hi, so my name's Lisa, and I wanted to share for our wins. We've been implementing new systems as we grow, and these systems are helping us to become more efficient so we don't miss opportunities and so we can grow more. So I'm just really thankful for the team being open to making all these changes.
Yeah, change is inevitable. Like everything is going to change all the time. So the more that we can lean into change and work together as a team to be efficient, that's awesome. What is one of the ways in which you're supporting implementing some of these systems?
How I'm supporting implementing them. Some of them I'm writing up the process on how to implement and what we'll be doing. So it's a process in itself, but yeah, we have new software, so we're learning how to use that to its fullest potential, and there's a lot to learn. Yeah, and getting team members certified with that, and yeah, and I think that our team realizes that the more we can grow the company, the more we will be able to grow personally, financially, and Yeah, so
I love that. Yes, process documentation is key. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it is being 10x and being aligned with the business. It means seeing the opportunity. And when the business is growing and when the team is growing and when we are implementing new things, those that show up, those that lean in, those that volunteer to help, those that teach others, that is who is going to stand out when it comes time for a promotion. That is who is going to stand out when it comes time for raises and additional opportunities for growth, right? We're all looking
exactly.
for those people to step up. So I love hearing that. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Oh, Dustin, was that a physical hand raise?
Yeah, I don't know how to do it on Zoom.
What's going on, Dustin?
Nothing. So my company just got us started with 10x, and just finished up week 2 last week of the employee program. And one of the things that it forced me to do was to think about what I think about during the week, because a lot of times we're on autopilot and just going through the motions and don't really give much thought to it. But I realized like a lot of the things that I was thinking about was just a lot of negative self stuff, and I was really just being too hard on myself. So going through that week 2 process was really helpful with just opening my eyes to that, so that I could make that change,
Mm-hmm.
and then in turn everything else is going to be positive too. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I love that. What a great win. Thank you for sharing, Dustin. Yeah, self-talk is so powerful. What we are thinking about, Brandon's quote, what we think is what we say, and what we say is what we do, and what we do becomes what we're known for, right? So what are you thinking about day in and day out in our professional lives and in our personal lives? Because ultimately what you're thinking about is also how you're showing up. And if you think that you're having negative thoughts, but you're putting a smile on and people don't feel the energy, they likely can feel the energy, right? And so feedback that I got early on when I started here almost 5 years ago was the doubt that I was spreading in meetings, because there were some big targets, there were some big goals, there were some complicated problems to solve, and I was, I had a limiting belief on whether or not we were going to be able to do that. And my manager at the time was like, when you bring that forward to the team when we're trying to problem solve, like, you are creating doubt in other people and you don't even realize it. Maybe the person next to you wasn't thinking that that was going to be a challenge. Maybe the rest of the team saw and saw how they were going to get there, and the fact that you kind of were thinking that and brought that forward, that's what's going to hold the team back. And so learned some lessons early on as I went through this program as well, and that kind of leads to what I wanted to talk about today. So put a 10x in the chat if you were on this call last week with Gabby. Couple. I'm assuming a bunch of you. Last week that's what I like to see. Last week she was talking about the week, or the video focused on communicating like a 10x employee, and she really focused on the one-on-one form and how you can show up in your one-on-one meetings with your manager and really demonstrate that you are thinking like a top performer. You are thinking about growth. You are thinking about how to move the ball forward and how you can really contribute to the organization. But in addition to just showing up in one-on-ones and really leveraging that form, Natalie also talks about communicating like a 10x employee throughout all of the meetings that we have throughout our work week, right? And so I'm sure most of us, I know myself, I'm in a lot of meetings, whether it's a team meeting or with another department or with certain individuals, we're working on projects, those types of things. The way that we show up in those meetings is so important to really move things forward. And so I loved what Lisa shared around implementation and systems, and then you, Dustin, as well. There's a few things that I want you guys to think about in terms of how you show up for meetings, starting with the preparation. Before you go to any meeting, you should know what you're trying to achieve in that meeting. Like, what is the purpose of that meeting? I know sometimes meetings get a little redundant, they get a little out of control, and you're meeting just for the sake of having a meeting. That is a waste of your time, and it's probably a waste of other people's times as well. So when you see things on your schedule whether you prep the night before for the next day, like what, today's Wednesday, at the end of the day today, like what's on my schedule for tomorrow? What do I need to get done tomorrow? Who am I going to be meeting with tomorrow? Or maybe you do that in the morning, but absolutely taking a moment and preparing what needs to happen for me to show up like a top performer in that meeting and provide value. How are you going to provide value in that meeting? And in order to do that, you need to come prepared. You need to understand, what is the goal? What are we trying to achieve? What problem are we trying to solve? And if you don't know, then you should ask, right? Who is the organizer of that meeting? Who set it up? And really getting clarity on what is the objective, so that you can show up prepared and you can come with potential solutions to areas of opportunity, right? Sometimes we call them problems. Here at Cardone, we like to call them opportunities, because it's an opportunity to solve something and make something bigger and better. And so being able to show up to a meeting and be solution oriented and provide solutions to areas that you need to focus on, you have to be prepared, and you have to know who's going to be there and what you're going to be talking about, and really thinking about not just things that need to get solved, but how are we going to solve them, and not being afraid to fail forward, because not every solution or every recommendation is going to be the solution that the team moves forward with, but being open and being innovative and thinking about, okay, here's some things that we've been talking about for a long time, some systems that need fixed, a process that doesn't work anymore, some team members that are struggling, like really thinking about the bigger picture and identifying ways to add value in that meeting is the preparation piece. And then there's the actual meeting, right? And so how are you engaging in these meetings? What are you thinking about? Are you looking over here while you're in a Zoom and you're working on something and you're not really paying attention until someone calls your name? Like, if that's what's happening, then why are you in the meeting? Like, you might as well be doing something else if that's how you're going to engage while you're there. So really thinking about, how am I engaging in this meeting? How am I smiling? What energy am I bringing? And what are we talking about? And who's taking notes? Because unless there is a dedicated note taker that is going to be sending out notes after the meeting to everyone that was in that meeting, then you should be taking notes. You should be able to follow up after that meeting to everyone that was involved and say, here's what we talked about. Here were the action items that were discussed. Here's next steps, right? Because oftentimes we forget. Like, you might think you're, oops, someone was unmuted there. You might think that, like, I got it, I heard everything that was just talked about, sounds great, and then a fire starts right after that. And all of a sudden you get pulled off track. You were going to go do that one thing that you just talked about, but something else came up, the phone rang, right? We're all busy, we're all moving very quickly in our roles. It is shocking how easy it is to forget small little details that will ultimately help you move quicker down the line. And so always take it upon yourself to take notes. Like, take notes during meetings. Like I said, unless someone has, a meeting agenda pulled up and they're actively taking notes on behalf of the group, you need to take ownership of that. And then follow up. Like, how are you following up after the meeting? Follow up. Like, it is so key. And so I learned this early on. When I first started here at Cardone Ventures, I was reporting directly to Natalie at the time for the first 2 years that I worked here. And she hammered that into me, that, just because someone else, it was someone else's responsibility, Jazmin, you had very clear action items, and a week has gone by and I haven't heard anything from you with regards to those action items. So you are lowering my confidence in you that you're actually going and getting things done, because you're not following up. You said you were going to do those things and you didn't. And I'm sure we're all guilty of that. And I am still guilty of that today, right? Because ultimately we have a lot to get done. We need to prioritize what is going to be most impactful. But if you're not able to get something done, if you committed to something in a meeting and you're not able to get that done, then you should follow up and you should let the people in that meeting know that you weren't able to get that done. And then that goes back to the preparation. If this is a recurring meeting and you're meeting with these people again next week and you weren't able to get those things done, like, how are you, what is your strategy as you, resurface with the team? Okay, here's what we all agreed to. Here's what we said we were going to get done. I wasn't able to get these things done. Here's where I'm going to make the time. Here's my commitment to the team, right? And really just following up and staying and keeping your word. And if you're not able to get those things done, if you are feeling stretched, that's where it goes back to those one-on-one conversations that that Gabby talked about recently and that we talk about all the time is being transparent with your team and with your manager. I am stretched. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to be able to create the time to get these things done. What is more important, right? Here's what I think is most important in my role, and here's what I think the priorities are, but are we in alignment? And just being open and having those conversations when applicable, because if you are showing up to meetings, you're not really paying attention, you're not following up, then ultimately you're decreasing confidence in those around you. And that's the opposite of what we want to do. That's the opposite of why we're here today. We want to create confidence and we want to demonstrate that we can take on more. Because it's usually crazy when you think you can't do something because you're stretched, and then you get to the other side of that project or the other side of that, whatever it was that you're working on. You're like, oh crap, I can actually do a lot more than I thought I can. Your confidence in yourself is going to go up. And so that's kind of the four things in terms of communicating like a 10x employee that Natalie is talking about in that video with regards to meetings. How are you preparing? Do you understand what the targets are? Are you able to show up to that meeting and provide value? How are you, problem solving? And then how are you engaging in that meeting? By taking notes, by staying engaged, by not being distracted, and then how you follow up. Like send that email afterwards. Here's what we talked about. Are we all in alignment? Especially, I guess, I missed at the tail end of the meeting, you should always recap action items. Like, well, okay, great. We just talked for 30 minutes about, all these different opportunities or whatnot. Like, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What are the 3 action items we just talked about? Who's responsible for doing them? When are they going to get done? Not being scared or holding back on asking those questions, even if it is someone that is a leadership role, right? Like everyone needs to be on the same page of what the commitments are, because maybe there's not clarity. Someone thought that you were going to do it and you thought they were going to do it, but we don't know because we didn't solidify that at the end of the meeting. So would love to hear any questions or examples of, some different meetings or, ways in which you've kind of struggled to create value in some of the meetings that you're in, or you're unsure if it is your place. Just open to answering questions and kind of hearing your guys' thoughts on this topic. Oh, I had a direct message in there. No one? Everyone just feels like every meeting they go to every single day is so valuable, and they've never struggled with following up on action items. Great. Love to hear that. We have a template that we use here. So I was just going to kind of, in terms of what do you send right after the meeting? So from a follow-up perspective, always putting action items at the top. So that is the most important thing coming out of that meeting. What were the action items? Who they're assigned to, right? And then underneath that, what are the 3 to 4 topics that were discussed, and what are the main bullet points? What are the key takeaways relative to those topics that everyone should be aware of? Also, that follow-up email, it can be, it's just like one more task to add to the plate that you don't always feel like you have time for, but it also is great documentation. So that later on, when it does come up of like, who was responsible for this, or no, that's not what we talked about, or that's not what we aligned on. Well, yeah, actually, here's the documentation of what happened in that meeting. So would still love to hear at least one volunteer on this topic. Or in terms of the one-on-ones that you've had since last week with Gabby, if there was anything that was helpful or a win from that content as well. If I sit here long enough, someone will raise their hand. Let's go, Roxanne.
Hello, Jasmine.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm Roxanne. I'm from Highland Park Lapidary. So I just wanted to share our, best practices when we are doing meetings. I think
Mhm.
from my end as one of the leaders of the organization, what I usually do is before I start the meeting, at least probably 5 to 10 minutes, I ask the team if they have valuable inputs that needs to be shared during the meeting. Otherwise, we will cancel it. Just so we are aware that everyone needs to be informed of anything that's pressing within the organization. Then if there's none and we can discuss it offline, then we'll cancel it and then we'll just focus on the things that we need to accomplish on that day. Right. I know in terms of how we do it, there are things that can or should be raised during the meeting, or can just be talked or can be just written through an email or through a chat, right? So that's how we do it. And also second thing is we base it in our tracker. So based on the previous conversation that we had, or we have a tracker or metrics that we based on, and if I see there's no major updates from the previous meeting, then we'll cancel it, right? And then we'll just, proceed with the usual deliverables or continuously inform the team to work on their deliverables to update what we need to update from the previous conversation that we had. So that's one of the things that we usually practice in Highland Park. Otherwise, we will still proceed with the meeting, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
and at the same time, once we proceed with the meeting, the way we encourage the team to speak up, and I do value and acknowledge that there are times that the meeting can be silent at times, right? So I value, your sending their questions on the chat box on your Zoom if we do our
Mhm.
meetings on Zoom. By the way, 100% of our meetings is really on Zoom. So we highly encourage the team to send their questions if they're afraid, quote unquote, to raise their hand, or I value our, one-on-ones right after the meeting. Like, can we
Yeah.
do a quick breakout room right after the meeting because I'm not that comfortable raising this particular question. So that's in a way how we navigate their meetings in the organization. And that's something that I value also. Like me personally, I don't force my team to come on, raise your hand, unmute yourself, and
Yeah.
raise your question. Right.
Yes.
The chat box is also as
Um,
important as unmuting
mhm.
yourself. That's how we do
Yes.
it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Unlike me in this group and forcing you guys to raise your hand because I sat there in
Yeah.
silence. No, I appreciate that because it's just good to hear a different perspective, right? And so you brought up a really great point in terms of if there are no meeting agenda, if there is no agenda items, canceling the meeting. So similarly with one-on-ones here at Cardone Ventures, if the team member does not send their one-on-one form ahead of the one-on-one meeting, it is our policy to cancel, for the manager to cancel and reschedule the meeting, because the one-on-one is the opportunity for you as the team member to bring to your manager all of the things that you either need approval on, you have ideas about, actions that you've taken, just things that you need to talk about. It is not a time for your manager to be telling you what to do, right? We should know what we need to do in our roles. We're running into areas of opportunity every single day. This is the opportunity to communicate with them. So similarly with meetings here at Cardone Ventures, so we've moved a lot of our meeting templates into our project management software called Asana, but for a very, very long time, and for some meetings still today, I'm going to share my screen. We used a good old fashioned Google Tracker for our meetings. So this was attached in the calendar invite, and we would typically just create a new date for the recurring meeting. And there would be an opportunity for those that are coming to that meeting to add their action items, or I'm sorry, to add their topics and add, who was going to be covering that topic. And then during the meeting, someone would be capturing notes and someone would be capturing action items. And if agenda topics were not added ahead of the meeting for those that were going to be in that meeting, then the meeting would be canceled. And that, kind of creates that accountability on preparation, because ultimately there's probably things that do need to be talked about in a recurring meeting with a specific department or a specific team. But if the team isn't coming prepared with things that need to be discussed, then the meeting doesn't need to take place, right? Or could could the meeting be canceled altogether and potentially just an email could be sent, right? And so really, what is the best use of your time? What is the best use of your team's time? And if you're in a leadership position or you're a team member, really speaking up and saying, you guys, I think we could better utilize this time by discussing these things, or if there isn't anything to discuss, let's just communicate offline. You mentioned something else that I wanted to touch on, which I loved, but for some reason I did totally just blank on it, so that's okay. Here at Cardone Ventures, we also have, as a team, we have different types of meetings, right? And so most departments, most teams meet every single morning. We have our all team meeting for 15 minutes with the entire organization. It's where we hear KPIs across our entire organization, gets our team really excited and aligned and pumped up for the day. And then typically right after that, most teams have a quick morning meeting where they all review what are the priorities for the day. We have a lot of client facing teams, right? We get to work with a lot of you guys and the businesses that you're in throughout the week, whether that's with our platform review, our strategic business unit, our business services, marketing services, those types of teams. It's so important if you are, a team that is producing and there are deadlines to be hit, making sure that everyone's on the same page. And it's really great when you can show up to that meeting and it's like boom, 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 right? We don't all want to be in another meeting every day, but those meetings become so valuable when it's like, here's the 3 things, here's the 5 things, here's the area of opportunity, and just finding that groove with your team and really, making sure it's setting you up for the day. Everyone knows what needs to get done, or, everyone knows what needs to get solved, and working collectively to do that, because we're all moving towards the same goal. We should all be moving towards the same mission and same vision for what needs to get done. We're in the weeds every single day. And so that alignment is really key. So that's kind of our standard. And then there are other meetings throughout the week that might be more strategic, might be cross-departmental, might be based on specific projects. If you don't have agendas established for those meetings, highly recommend doing that. Getting descriptions in your actual calendar invites, like what is the purpose of this meeting? What are we trying to solve? Is this recurring meeting still needed? So it's kind of the overview of really what Natalie is discussing in that video, but would be happy to hear any other questions or ideas or thoughts as you've moved through some of the other videos as well. And then also I have a direct message. How do you create alignment so that the leader isn't getting a meeting recap from everyone on the call? Or do they want one from each person on the call? Great question. That's where our meeting agenda, the template that I just showed you guys, if there is, a group of team members on the call, there should be likely, like, where is the documentation? Where are we tracking action items? We've, moved into a software to support our meeting agendas, but for 3 years before we moved into Asana, we had the tracker I just showed you for every meeting. And that does eliminate the need for every single individual to send the leader a recap. Because it's documented in that tracker. But for those one-off conversations where you're flying by someone in the hallway and you're like, oh hey, Tom, like this thing happened, I wanted to run it by you, I had a couple of questions, like what do you think? In that scenario, I absolutely always recommend sending a recap. We just talked for a few minutes, here's what we aligned on, here's what I'm going to go do. When it is a more structured team meeting, there should be a designated stakeholder for capturing those action items, for capturing those notes. And if there isn't anybody, then volunteer. Like, that's a great opportunity to just volunteer and show that you're engaged and show that this meeting is important, and capture those notes and validate at the end of the meeting what the action items were. And then that person, whomever was responsible for capturing those notes on our meeting agenda tracker, then that person would send an email to everybody that was in that meeting with a screenshot of what was captured, a link to the tracker, and any specific things that needed to be called out. but thank you for that. Thank you for that question. So with that, let's all run to our next meeting. Let's all show up with a smile, take notes, and we're here if you guys need us. So we'll see you next week. Thank you guys for coming.